Hello, this is укрлайф TV, and we continue our broadcasting from Kiev. And our guest today is General Hodges. General, hello, and thank you very much to be with us today.
Thank you for the privilege.
Thank you. General, the Ukrainian offensive has begun. What is your overall understanding of situation? Maybe let's speak a little bit about strategy and tactics of this offensive.
Well, first of all, I have enormous confidence in General Zaluzhny and the Ukrainian general staff and Ukrainian soldiers that this is going to be successful. People should be patient and understand that in the early days of any operation like this, that there are going to be challenges, there are going to be casualties, and also we are not entitled to know everything that's going on. I think the general staff does a good job protecting information so that the Russians don't know what they're doing. So this protects the mission and it protects soldiers' lives. So I have great faith and confidence in how Ukraine is going to conclude this offensive. I mean, most of the army is not even in the fight yet. These are still early days with the leading units that are, I think, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for places. It's very hard. I mean, this is very, very difficult. And yet I think we're seeing a lot of success anyway. So that's how I would say this.
General, I have interesting view for the situation from the U.S. Institute for Study of War. They say the Ukrainians defender may suspend their counteroffensive. Such a decision is necessary for the command to revise its tactics for future operation. How you could comment this?
Yeah, I doubt this. To suspend it, again, this is only the first days when the leading units are involved trying to find the cracks and the vulnerabilities. So anybody that thinks that this should be suspended, I think really does not fully understand how these things work and what's going on. No doubt, in every offensive operation, commanders will make adjustments as the plan runs into reality. I mean, there's an old axiom that says no plan survives first contact, because you know what you plan to do, and then you encounter the enemy or something. Of course, they're going to make adjustments. I mean, this is as old as warfare. But now that it has begun, to say that they would suspend it, I think that doesn't sound like a credible analysis. Now, there is one other thing that once the main attack gets underway, and we'll know it's the main attack when we see multiple brigades, armor brigades, all in one or two places. Then I think you're going to, there is a point where you have to stop and refuel and to do certain things. So an operational pause, but we're a long way from that, or them even needing to do that.
General, you know that many Ukrainians, ordinary people, expected that we will win very quickly, but not very, but quickly. Yeah, I think that many experts and governments expected us to win much more quickly. But nevertheless, we see that now it looks like it takes much more time than we expected. But in that situation, we're really worried that if we not achieved our goals very quickly, Russia, will dig up the sixth line of defense, and it will create more and more problem for Ukrainian army. And we're really worried that weapons which we receive from our alliance will be, not come so quickly. And something could happen which could, just stop or a little bit make not so fast of our counteroffensive. how you could comment this, and do you anticipate such scenario before, that it will not be so quick counteroffensive and we will not receive results so quickly?
In 1944, when the Allies landed on Normandy in June of 1944, many people expected that the war would be over before the end of the year, before Christmas. And of course, the Allies had a very difficult time getting off of the beach for weeks. The Allies were delayed before they finally were able to break out. And then it went fast, and then we hit more German resistance, and then it stopped. And then a terrible winter set in, and then of course the Germans launched their counteroffensive, called what became known as the Battle of the Bulge, and like, oh my God, it's a disaster. And then after that, then the Allies were able to go on the offensive again, and it still was another 5 months before the war ended. So we know from history, when you're fighting an opponent that is willing to sell the lives of their soldiers the way the Russians are willing to sell the lives of their soldiers, and they have a lot of them, that, yeah, of course it's going to take time. So I think we should have much more confidence in Ukraine's soldiers. I mean, these are the same guys that we were all praising for the last year of how incredible, look at all they're doing, okay? And after 2 weeks, people are already talking about, oh my God, it's a failure? I don't think so.
The current offensive goes against many military doctrines. We attack deeply echeloned and reinforce defenses without 3-to-1 number advantage, without air superiority, and supposedly without sufficient long-range capabilities. By the way, you wrote this in your recent Twitter, yeah? And it looks like 20th century war, not just 21st century war. And in that case, did you think that our Western alliance expected different results? And do you think that they are about to change the approach to our offensive?
So I did say, and I still say, that Ukraine needs long-range precision weapons, and I'm very frustrated that our administration has so far refused to provide the ATACMS and other long-range precision weapons which would help Ukraine hit Russian targets in Crimea. Because at the end of the day, Crimea is the decisive terrain. As long as Russia occupies Crimea, Ukraine will never be safe, and Ukraine will never be able to rebuild its economy. So Crimea is the decisive terrain. And if the U.S. would provide these long-range weapons to Ukraine, then the Russians would have to begin to leave Crimea. So this is an area where I think we have made a mistake. We, the U.S., are making a mistake, and also our reluctance and slowness about helping with F-16s is another bad policy decision by the United States. I don't understand it, to be honest. Something should have happened months ago. And having said that, yes, of course, you would want to have air support when you're conducting a ground offensive. Of course you do. But Ukraine does not have the luxury of waiting. I mean, you have part of your country is occupied by Russians who have demonstrated that they will continue to kill innocent people. So Ukrainian leadership could not just keep waiting and waiting and waiting for more modern aircraft. Now, I'm not an expert. I don't know if Ukraine is getting maximum benefit out of what it does have in terms of aircraft, but I trust that they will make the best use of everything that they do have. This ratio of 3-to-1, this is a general sort of doctrinal concept, and it's 3-to-1 at the point. It's not overall 3-to-1. It's 3-to-1 at the point. That's what that means. So I am sure that the general staff and all the commanders below the general staff are doing everything they can to get that sort of advantage. And it's not just bodies, it's also the artillery, it's the engineers, it's all the capability to be able to overwhelm the Russian defenders. I think this is actually happening in many places. So I remain very optimistic.
General, I made many interviews with Ukrainian officers from Ukrainian army, and I prepare some points for you to comment if it is possible. It looks like a little bit small dialogue, virtual, of course, but nevertheless, yeah. First of all, they say that we are adapting. We have learned our lessons from past mistakes.
Yeah, no soldiers in the world are more adaptive than Ukrainian soldiers. I've been impressed since I first encountered them back in Yavoriv at the training area in 2015. So yes, of course they're adapting.
And what about Russia's army? How Russia's army is adapting?
Well, the Russian military has 3 or 4 major problems. Number one, none of their soldiers want to be there. I mean, they're not defending their homeland. So your willingness to fight and your ability to fight is different when you're defending your homeland versus if you don't want to be there. Number two, the leadership of the Russian military, they hate each other. Prigozhin, Kadyrov, Shoigu, Gerasimov, these guys hate each other. And that hatred and rivalry trickles down below through all their subordinates. So there's no trust. And I think that this also undermines their fighting ability. Their logistics, Ukraine has done a very good job targeting Russian logistics centers, ammunition, and of course, artillery is so important to Russia's way of fighting, but it's difficult to move artillery ammunition. And I think Ukraine has done a good job using long-range fires, but also partisan special forces doing things in the rear area to make it difficult for Russia. So I would say those are the areas where Russia and then frankly, it's not in their nature to quickly adapt. I mean, because to adapt, you have to acknowledge that you made a mistake or that something's wrong. And I don't think that's allowed in the Russian system.
One more point from our officers, it is much more about strategy, as I understand. Now, when we started our offensive, Russian artillery have basically uncovered itself, allowing for our artillery to commence precision strikes.
Yeah, Ukraine does not have to match Russian artillery in terms of numbers of tubes. What matters is Ukraine able to destroy or disrupt Russian artillery so that it can't just keep shooting back. And I think by finding it and then with long range precision, that's how you do that. That's why I keep emphasizing the importance of long range precision weapons for Ukraine is important. That's how you overcome the Russian advantage in numbers.
Next point, they say, don't expect a Desert Storm style combined force operation.
Yeah, well, of course, the Iraqi army that was defeated during Desert Storm was not nearly as capable as Russian forces are. It's a different sort of terrain. And of course, in Desert Storm, we had 100% total air superiority. We don't have that here. So no, it would not be realistic to expect a Desert Storm type breakthrough, after 4 days. I mean, that's obviously not going to happen. So let's focus on not, I wish it was like Desert Storm. Of course we do, but that's not realistic. What is realistic is that Ukraine is going to keep moving forward every single day, and that there are no positive outcomes for Russia as long as we continue to support Ukraine in what it's trying to do. And people need to, it means a lot to soldiers when they know that people support them. It gives you a lot of a lot of courage.
Western tanks and Bradleys are saving lives. Sorry, numerous pictures are available that shows that machine sacrifice itself, but the crew remains alive.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we are seeing evidence of that, and nobody should be surprised by that. What I am impressed with is the reports that Ukraine already understands that they have to evacuate equipment that is damaged so that you can repair it and put it back in the fight. I mean, this is something that we practice doing, and Ukrainians are already doing that. So every vehicle that's hit is not automatically destroyed. And I think professional soldiers know that. So I would expect that many of the Bradleys and Leopards and other vehicles that are damaged will be repaired and put back into the fight.
General, and I have a special question for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that U.S. Army has never participated directly in such large-scale, old-school war with a comparable enemy since maybe Vietnam or Korea or even Second World War. And in that case, how would the American Army deal with these defense lines?
I think it has been well since the end of the Cold War. You're right. We haven't on that sort of a scale. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, there was intensive fighting against the Republican Guard, but they were not in the sort of defensive positions or what we're seeing from Russia. I think actually what the Ukrainians are doing is very similar to how we would do it, except that, of course, we would use enormous amounts of air power to destroy the logistics and destroy the headquarters to disrupt that. But to in terms of getting through the obstacles, we would have to do in concept what Ukraine is doing. You have to use artillery. You try to create a situation where engineers can come up and clear a path through the minefields. This is very dangerous. It's very difficult. And then you push troops to capture places in the defenses, and then you keep moving forward. That is a traditional way of doing it, and you try to protect your soldiers, of course, by using artillery and by using other devices to minimize the exposure of the soldiers in these very different situations. So if your question is, would we be doing it better? Of course, the fact that we would have the air power and the long-range strike capabilities would make it much more it would be significantly more effective. I think Ukraine is doing it as well as anybody could, all things considered.
Let's speak a little bit about Russia, because we know that last offensive of Russia was not successful. And what do you think? What today are the possibilities of Russian army for reinforce, for build, new defense system, or to offensive, for example? What do you think? How you understand the situation in Russian army?
Well, I think if they are given the chance, they will continue trying to build more defenses. And if they believe that we are not willing to help Ukraine win, then I think the Kremlin feels they can keep doing this. I mean, when we, the West, indicate that, come on, Ukraine, we need to settle for, that's oxygen for the Kremlin. And so I think what the Kremlin does depends a lot on what we say and do. And I think this is, I'm sure that nobody in Ukraine is willing to accept anything short of a victory, pushing Russia out of Ukrainian territory, because we see what happens to Ukrainians who live in occupied territory. So, and again, I keep mentioning Crimea because I think it is the most important piece of terrain in all of Ukraine right now. And so that's got to be liberated.
Do you still think that Crimea is a key? Let's a little bit back to this question. Do you think that Crimea is still key? And do you think is it possible to win or deoccupied Crimea without long-range artillery, for example?
There is no doubt that without Crimea, Ukraine will never be safe and secure, and it will never be able to fully rebuild its economy. Because with Russia sitting in Crimea, it blocks all ships going up into Azov Sea. So even after Mariupol and Berdyansk, for example, are liberated, they still can't do anything because Russia would block Azov Sea. Russian Navy SIG in Sevastopol can still block or disrupt any commerce going in and out of Odessa or in and out of Mykolaiv. And so, I mean, that would have to be, I'm guessing, that Ukrainian leadership knows that it would be impossible to rebuild economy. And that's not good for Europe, not just for Ukraine. That's not good for Europe. If you have millions of Ukrainian refugees that have no place to return to, and you can't get started. And that's not good for millions of Africans and people in the Middle East that depend on grain from Ukraine. So I don't know how or why anybody thinks it's okay that Crimea should remain under Russian control.
And the last question, what is your understanding of future of offensive? Is it possible just one offensive or maybe two offensive or maybe three offensive? It's depends because many people just discuss, for example, in the West, that Ukraine have only one chance for offensive, and we're worried about that. What do you think? How it could looks like? What is the scenario?
Why would anybody think that Ukraine only has one chance? I mean, when I hear this, it's like, no. I mean, Ukraine is not going to stop. Ukrainians are not going to stop. This is their country. This is your country. You're trying to liberate your country. You have millions of people that are still in occupied areas. Your economic recovery depends on getting all of the territory back. And so, yes, I hear that, but this is an artificial creation of journalists and of politicians and people in the West that are like, well, if they don't get it done now, that's it. Says who? Why? Who says that? And I think that if we are serious about the values that we say are at stake here, then we have to actually do something about defending those values. So I don't accept. There will be people that want to quit for sure. They're like, oh, they didn't make it. Sorry, time for peace now. Those people have a serious lack of moral courage and also lack proper understanding of who Russia is and what Russia is.
And last question. Do you believe that one day NATO will participate in this war?
I think that that's extremely unlikely. Because keeping 31 nations together is a challenge, and so I think the administration has correctly emphasized the importance of maintaining unity in the alliance. But I think that also the alliance, there will be members of the alliance that will do more and more because they see it's in their own interest for their own security to make sure that Ukraine is successful. But I don't imagine that you'll see NATO troops or capabilities actually in the fight. And to be candid, President Zelensky said, I don't need your troops. We just need the tools. And so I would think that there's no need for NATO to be in it. But what is needed is for NATO, all the nations of NATO, to decide it is important for all of us that Ukraine is successful, that Ukraine actually wins.
General Hodges, thank you very much to be with us today. Thank you.
Lyudmila, thank you very much for the privilege.
Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Okay.